have an interesting presentation and a demo on how agentic journeys can be built and used in insurance. Now, this is something we've been hearing a lot all through the day. Now, we will have a presentation from the experts in this field. Please welcome Mr. Tapan Hoskeri, Principal Architect, Financial Services of Google Cloud. Tapan designs solutions for BFSI firms and focuses on the use of cloud and AI to solve real customer problems. He's passionate about simple, scalable technology that delivers measurable value. Please welcome Tapan.
Very good afternoon, everyone. And we'll get straight into it. So the purpose of this talk, right, so over the this is my 10th year as a cloud architect as well as an AI/ML architect. And the breathlessness in the industry has never been more at a fever pitch than in the past couple of years. This session is a humble attempt to share what we have seen resonate with customers across the BFSI spectrum. I've pulled in examples from a couple of other industries as well within financial services to see kind of what resonates. And these are some of the lessons that we have learned in our journeys along with our customers. So hoping that you'll have some tangible takeaways at the end of it. Thank you. So what's driving innovation, right? So if I have to pick 3 pillars of conversations, and these come right from the board, from the C-level, and also from the bottom up, right? From developers, operations. What are we really looking at in terms of helping our customers with agentic AI or with generative AI as a precursor? We have multimodality and thinking models. We'll unpack what that means in a couple of slides. We have this notion of agentic AI, but closer to home, what is a really good starting point to build out agentic AI within your org? And the answer, like all good financial services customers tell us, is what can you do to improve my workflow? What can you do to improve my business process? Because a shiny piece of tech on its own is awesome, right? Tokens, the context window, reasoning, etc. But what can it do to my process or workflow? And thirdly, what is it that I can do for my internal customers? So there's been a lot of focus on the external customer, but more often than not, it's the internal customer experience that always came across as a second-class citizen. Are there any easy, tangible steps that you could take to help my internal customers feel a little more joy in their day-to-day work so that our external customers automatically benefit, right? That has to be infectious and go down to the external edge as well. So a slightly dated factoid, no surprise to most of you in the room. Most of the insights that we see our customers struggle with, right? When it comes to dealing with unstructured data. What do we mean by unstructured data? Anything which does not have a very well-defined or a semi-defined schema, right? Now, these could be call center recordings, these could be images, this could be PDFs, scanned images, all of that very, very, very prevalent in the insurance industry. And what has been the genesis of this, right? So, circa 2016, a suitably sepia-toned image. If there was one thing that good cloud architects advise their customers, do not destroy the rawest data that you're accumulating. Now, these could be logs from your IT systems. These could be call center recordings. These could be images taken. These could be reports, right? These could be third-party reports. Do not destroy the raw data. Once you've extracted information using the tech stack 10 years ago, the normal tendency was to discard that because I have a data mart populated in my warehouse. Why do I need to keep this? The advice that we used to always give customers back then, not to say I'm a very good cloud architect, was you never know what's around the corner, right? Maybe in the distant future or not so distant future, you will have easier ways of parsing this data so that you can understand your customers better, you can understand your businesses better. And that is effectively the modern equivalent of, I have a highly energetic 12-year-old son, and my favorite pastime is to try and speak Gen Alpha with him. It's a different language, by the way. In another 5 years, they'll be joining the workforce, and God help us, right? But my favorite pastime is to try and talk Gen Z with him, and that irritates him no end. So the thing that he tells me is, why do you take 15 pictures in burst mode? Yeah, because storage is cheap, right? Felt cute, might delete later. This is also what has started to happen to enterprises as cloud storage became competitively priced. Data started accumulating, but the path from data to insight was still as complicated till about 18 months right, ago in our industry life cycle. What fundamentally changed, right? So again, to use like these three lenses to look at data, volume, velocity, and variety. Now, volume and velocity, obviously with the collective wisdom in this room, all of you dealing with India scale is not something that I'm here to talk about. The third bucket, where variety, right? What is it as simple as me calling an API, pointing it to a bunch of unstructured data, and getting something tangible on the outside with minimal effort, right? Minimal. It is not effortless, mind you. There is a fair bit of effort which goes in, but it is still minimal compared to just about 18 months ago, right? So what is this variety and where exactly do you see this change things for you? There are a couple of demos towards the end of the session which should hopefully illustrate what I'm kind of talking about. But this again, courtesy my son, is a term that I asked him how his school life is going. He says he's quietly coping. I said, for the fees I pay, you better loudly thrive, right? So I want a little more thriving from you. And we kind of see this analogy even with enterprises struggling with unstructured data. Is there one simple tool which I can use and pretty much plug into any surface, right? Any kind of system which I have, be it business facing, be it IT facing, be it internal employee facing, right? So what is that one tool which helps me make sense of the kind of data that I'm sitting on, probably missing out on insights that I'm not even aware of, simply because my people don't have the time to look at each and every piece of unstructured data, right? And I'll show you a couple of examples of what this could mean. Hint, this tool is called Gemini, which is our large language model. And the journeys that we've taken along with our customers in trying to help them use this particular tool to make sense of the vast amounts of data that they're sitting on to potentially drive both top line and improve bottom line, right? So it's the world's first natively multimodal LLM. That's a mouthful, but what it effectively means is in a single API call, pay-per-use API call, I could send in text, I could send in an audio file, I could send in a video, I could send it an image and ask it to correlate and give me something out of that. Now, what does that something mean? It's very individual to your business problem, to your business process. But it is as simple as calling an API and passing it whatever data you have. What you bring to the table is your secret sauce, right? It's your secret sauce in terms of knowledge, in terms of what your businesses are really looking to solve for when it comes to writing those prompts and pointing it to that data, right? So if I were to kind of visually show what our journey with customers has been like, right? What is happening today? Customers are realizing business value with Gemini as an adapter, right? To use a slightly technical term. If I plug Gemini on the left-hand side, I could feed it possibly any kind of data that I have within my organization. On the right-hand side is where things have gotten very interesting. If you look at the first wave of LLMs or the consumer-grade transformer models like the ChatGPTs and even the consumer-facing Geminis of the world, we were so used to text outputs, right? Stories, essays, summaries, or meeting notes. But what is the true, real value prop that is starting to emerge is, I can ask Gemini to listen to a call center recording, and if I already have certain IT systems which expect a batch file in the form of a CSV, or if it expects a JSON payload, I could have Gemini generate a machine-readable output as well, right? So where does this kind of take the GTM conversation or the path to production or the path to value? It drastically shortens that, because in the first wave of GenAI adoption that at least we were seeing, there was this tendency to rip and replace everything that we have with LLMs, right? We will change the whole shop floor. That really didn't quite take off. But if there is a midway where if I have a bunch of existing investments in technology, in operations and processes, if I can transform my data into the contracts that I've already invested a fair significant amount of time, energy, and effort in, that becomes the happy path, right? So think of Gemini as an adapter which can help you go from practically any kind of data input that you throw into it with your abilities to direct it to look for those insights. And on the right-hand side, the format could be tailored either to a human-readable kind of an output, or it could also talk to machines, right? And this is the genesis or the foundation for what I like to think of agentic AI, right? So this has been phase one, where we take a bunch of unstructured data, start to give out these insights. Now that the insights are appearing, there was still a human element to the action taken, right? Once I get this, what do I do with the information? So can you now further take me down a path where once Gemini gives me what I'm looking for, validated according to the standards, either an IT system that I already have expects, or if there's a human-powered workflow, how can you further help me automate and basically take, quote-unquote, intelligent action on this data? That is by far the purest and the simplest explanation that our customers have taught us. Like, look beyond all of the breathlessness around agentic AI, but it ultimately boils down to this, right? If I have a bunch of unstructured data, which I have struggled with for years, if I get to a place where I'm getting meaningful output out of it, instead of having humans consume that output at every step of the way, can you reduce the number of humans looking at that workflow? Can you reduce the TAT that I have when it comes to serving either an internal customer or an external customer, right? That's in a nutshell what agentic AI is effectively supposed to do. A slightly textbookish definition, LLMs which could then be coupled with taking action is equal to agent, right? And what is an action, right? What do we really mean by action? It could, think of this as a self-contained program. I don't want to use the word microservice very loosely, but the closest cousin, the closest analogy is a microservice, which has an LLM at the center, like Gemini, right? Or a Llama, right? Then you could have it reason, convert the data, and once it is satisfied with what the insight is or what the data payload is, you could call an API. Now, this API could be external. This API could be internal. You could call a database to maybe change the state of a policy or change the status of a claim, right? Or you could also have it refer to a collective corpus of knowledge. Again, this has been a very aspirational problem for our customers to solve for. The tribal knowledge is between the ears of every talented employee. Lots of cycles have been spent on capturing that tribal knowledge, but the return from that tribal knowledge corpus hasn't really shown a lot of promise till about recently, right? So if I have people taking notes, if I have call transcripts, if I have manuals, if I have regulations, all of that constitutes a very custom secret sauce corpus for my business. So I can have the agent refer to that, speak my brand voice, take a decision according to my SOP, my regulatory posture, and then and only then do the things that I wanted to automate, right? So this in the purest form is what an agent effectively is. A blowout is, like we discussed, at the core, you have a large language model. It also has something called as memory, right? Because if you've ever dealt with repeating yourself over and over again to perform a task, it can remember the steps during an execution. It can also remember steps from past executions if you design it that way, right? So the facility exists, and what the action effectively was what we covered, basically. Yeah? How did we get here? What fundamentally changed in the last 18 months? 23 was all about text, stories, lullabies, summaries, right? Song lyrics. We were completely, overjoyed with this, thinking that this is as good as it gets. What happened in 24? These models became multimodal. They could understand text, they could understand images, they could understand songs, and start to bake in all of that. They also got better at generating stuff, right? Videos, audio, images. This is where things are poised, right? Because these models got better at explaining themselves. How did you basically arrive at a particular conclusion? Explain the thought process, or what was the sequence of steps that led you to this place, which effectively forms the core for any kind of agentic behavior or any kind of agentic decision making. It's not enough for you to go from point A to point B. Again, within the bounds of a regulated industry, explainability becomes super critical, right? So for a given task, how did the agent reach the output? What were the sequence of steps that it took to reach where it has, right? That becomes core to how agents started to behave. So the LLM could reason through a task and then figure out what tools or what actions to take so that they became better at improving your processes, at improving your tasks, and basically assisting your workforce do their own jobs better, right? Our play here as a platform provider, we cater to probably every audience, right, that is interested in building an agent, starting from infrastructure to the kind of data stores that you need to power the long-term and the short-term memory that I was talking about, to state-of-the-art models. This is again a very, very fast evolving space, right? The likes of Gemini, along with two main audiences, right? The two broad audiences for any kind of AI consumption is either your technology teams or your business/non-technology teams within the org, right? So for both audiences, we have offerings. On the technology side, right, along with obviously powering the core of the agent with LLMs like Gemini, we also are investing in building truly open standards to either build an agent, right? How do you write your own agents within your own organizations and deploy them anywhere you choose, right? Using the agent development kit or ADK, you could host it on your laptop, you could host it on another cloud within your data centers or on Google Cloud, right? So it's completely open source. This market, right, the agentic marketplace is a thing of the future, which is again poised to take off. What REST APIs kind of did for an entire ecosystem play when it came to fintechs giving you REST APIs, which you could then integrate into your business workflows, those APIs will evolve to the next stage by being powered by natural language, right? Essentially, they will be agentic powered APIs or agents which will be exposed by the ecosystem, which you will consume using nothing more than natural language, right? So to facilitate that, an entire universe of external facing agents, Google is investing in building out an A2A protocol, agent to agent protocol. Again, it's a completely open industry standard on GitHub. There's nothing proprietary or closed loop about this. Agentic payments is again an extension of consumer expectations from what an agent should do, right? So I talked about agents taking action. How is the shopping experience of the future kind of going to look like, right? So there are possibilities where you could say, look, I'm looking to buy increased consumption, disposable income. I'm looking to buy a particular phone, but I'm not willing to pay more than 25,000 rupees. This is the window in which I'm looking to buy. I know that there are 5 sales going on across major e-commerce providers. Here is my credentials list to each of those platforms. Why don't you keep monitoring this price on my behalf? Only and only when it drops below 25K, you will execute a mandate, which is again signed and agreed upon by me, right? You are going to execute that mandate when my strike price. So it's a very capital markets way of doing things, which is then going to start getting into how we even purchase and consume, right? So to facilitate that, again, we have an agentic payments protocol, which was just launched roughly around 3 weeks back, which will power the retail experiences or the e-commerce experiences of the future. Encourage you to kind of really look out for this. When it comes to the employee of the future, again, every person that you know within a certain younger age cohort or demographic is going to use agentic AI or natural language powered interfaces, right, within their daily lives. What will they expect when they walk into your organizations as employees? They will expect the same kind of intuitive experience, because if you're going to hire them as operations or support or branch staff, right, and effectively expect them to juggle with 10 different systems to serve one request, that is going to cause a bit of dissonance in what they do in a personal capacity versus a professional capacity, right? To kind of facilitate that, we have an offering called as Gemini Enterprise, which is internal facing, which is for your staff, your folks, to be able to consume information and interact with it and do their business tasks just as seamlessly as they would be going about their personal lives, right? So if you can cross-relate or cross-pollinate that agentic payments kind of a purchase experience, that is one very, very convenient or an extremely empowered generation of workers, new age workers, who are going to come in and join the workforce. How do you make that experience as seamless, be it in terms of discovering information so that they can do their jobs, right? Or the ability to build their own custom agents without any kind of technical knowledge. That is true democratization of technology. We've been talking about this for the longest time now, but this is a huge step in making information, data, and actions accessible so that you're empowering your edge within a given role boundary, but at the same time ensuring that your data, privacy, and role-based access controls are always maintained, right? So Gemini Enterprise is effectively the internal workbench or the internal offering that you could leverage to truly empower your workforces. Yeah? The initial interest areas, I have demos not quite related completely to these, but I think underwriting claims, we've heard a lot of examples that has become very, very front line and center for insurance today. But what we are also seeing increased interest is in the inward functions, right? Anything to do with operations, financials, right? Anyone who never gets the same kind of extremely awesome external facing interfaces, right? Because there is a external customer facing interface, and then there is the slightly clunkier internal facing interfaces that business and operations is used to. So what can we do to make these experiences a little more seamless and a little more smoother is roughly where we are at. Enough of natural language on the PPT. Now we could go in for some natural language powered software, right? I'll just show you 2 or 3 use cases that we're looking to kind of solve for. Hyper-personalization is typically something that we think of on the way in, right? Basically, when a customer is browsing or what are kind of sales offers that I can do. But for outbound calling, right? If I have a bunch of customers for which I want to build extremely personalized calling scripts per customer, right? If I have data which lives in various silos, these are the list of products that I would like to kind of pitch to this particular customer, and with whatever kind of cohort data or market intelligence that you have. Remember that diagram on the left-hand side? Gemini really doesn't care about what data you put into it. I throw all of this into one prompt and instruction into Gemini, and it generates a hyper-personalized talking point per customer, right? While what I've showed you is effectively a real-time view, you could have an overnight batch run this for every customer that you plan to reach out the next day, so that your call center agents, when they are reaching out to people, have detailed and highly kind of personalized contextual talking points. Was it impossible to do before? Not really. But is it super simple to do now? At the risk of overquoting that, yes, it is far more simple to do this today than it was maybe 6 months ago, right? So the agent basically fetched all of this, and these data sources, again, you don't necessarily need to centralize them, right? You could query them in place and give it to Gemini to give you what it saw. The next example is around call, post-call, post-center, post-call.
जी, मुझे अपने बच्चे की पढ़ाई के लिए एक इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लान के बारे में जानना था।
हाँ, बिल्कुल सही जगह कॉल किया है आपने। हमारे पास एक जबरदस्त यूलिप प्लान है बच्चों के लिए। आपका पैसा 10 साल में डबल हो जाएगा, गारंटी है।
अच्छा, इसमें रिटर्न्स की क्या गारंटी है?
सर, गारंटी ही समझिए। हमारा जो सुपर ग्रोथ इक्विटी फंड है वो हर साल आराम से 18 से 20% का रिटर्न देगा ही देगा। मार्केट आजकल बहुत अच्छा चल रहा है।
लेकिन यूलिप में तो रिस्क भी होता है ना, और चार्जेस क्या क्या हैं?
अरे सर, रिस्क कुछ नहीं है, और चार्जेस की चिंता आप मत करिए, वो सब मैनेज हो जाता है। आप मेन फायदे पर ध्यान दीजिए, आपकी बेटी की कॉलेज की फीस आराम से निकलेगी।
अच्छा, और मैं कौन सा फंड चुनूं? इसमें ऑप्शन होंगे ना?
देखिए, बाकी फंड्स में पैसा डालकर कोई फायदा नहीं है। आप मेरी मानिए और अपना सारा पैसा सुपर ग्रोथ इक्विटी फंड में ही लगाइए। यही आपके लिए बेस्ट फैसला है, मैं बता रहा हूं आपको।
ठीक है, और अगर मुझे बीच में पैसों की जरूरत पड़ी तो? क्या मैं निकाल सकता हूँ?
हाँ हाँ बिल्कुल, आप जब चाहें अपना पैसा निकाल सकते हैं, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगी।
मैं सोचकर आपको बताता हूँ।
ठीक है, पर जल्दी सोचिएगा, ये बेस्ट प्लान है। ओके बाय।
So much to unpack there. I can see the execs getting really restive with that call. But if there's a good behavior checklist that you want to run, right, it can basically listen to all the major Indian languages, get you the transcripts, and score it against a good behavior checklist, right? There was so much that was going on in that call, along with the timestamps, and like an explanation, right? A justification of why it basically scored. Again, all of this is one API call which you could run as overnight batches. And then you build pipelines, right? On top of these insights, you could have it do various other kind of analytical workflows. Lastly, underwriting, right? So when we look at property visits, what is the biggest problem that our customers say? This comes from the banking industry, but I believe it should resonate, right? Site survey inspections are costly. And if you really want to scale that down to the last mile, you can't keep paying that for every geography that you really want to expand to. If we take the intelligence, if the feet on the street are just going to click pictures, shift left to all of this intelligence within Gemini, it could effectively do like a chronological analysis of the risk in the construction progress. What is it that it has spotted, right? And if you notice, there is a maker-checker workflow, a pair of eyes. So we have two agentic programs. One made the first draft of the report. The second checked the contents of the report, verified whether it was doing a good job, and then gave you this final kind of output. Right? So this is effectively what you could model exactly as per the workflows which your humans are powering today, so that if it requires 4 pairs of eyes, you could make do with 2, right? The first 2 pairs of eyes could be agentic programs like these. The next 2 pairs of eyes could basically validate what is happening, reducing your overall tax, and even catching insights that maybe your human workflow processes has kind of not been able to catch. Right? And lastly, if I were to show you Gemini Enterprise, how easy it is to create like a no-code agent, right? So this is something that a business or an operations user can create themselves, right? With the personality as well as the kind of task that it needs to handle. This is all it takes to really define that agent, that robotic picture that you saw, right? And if I were to give this particular agent an image of a retina scan and a doctor's PDF report, and ask it to correlate and maybe spot something that it couldn't. Powering it is, again, Gemini, right? So there's a PDF and a retina scan. It basically can give you an opinion, right? It could maybe spot something that the human process didn't, or it could corroborate the quality of your human processes. And this is effectively all it really takes to build a low-code agent and expose it to basically anyone within your org. And that's my time. Thank you very much for your time and attention.